Chapter 3670 Chapter 744 Holy Guard defeated. Chapter 3670 Chapter 744 Holy Guard defeated. Chapter 744 Holy Guard defeated. Above the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp, Phoenix Rain and the 13 other Tier 6 experts from Shifeng's home god's domain hovered proudly in the air, each radiating a towering pillar of mana that covered the entire resurrection camp. The auras they radiated also made everyone on the battlefield feel as if 14 demon gods had just awoken from a long slumber. This development shocked everyone on the battlefield. Even Fry and Garut, who were in the middle of an intense battle, subconsciously stopped their actions to look at Phoenix Rain's group of 14. Level 200 was a massive turning point in God's domain. This held true for both monsters and players. In the greater God's domain, even a level 200, Tier 5 player fully equipped with fragmented legendary items could already trade blows evenly with a level 190, Tier 6 player fully equipped with fragmented legendary items, let alone level 210+, Tier 6 God-ranked experts. In the current Eternal Realm, level 210+, Tier 6 God-ranked experts were virtually invincible. Yet, Zero Wing had 14 of such experts. What kind of method did he use exactly? How can he bring so many level 200+ players into the Eternal Realm? Fry was filled with disbelief as she looked at Shifeng, who stood aboard the Silver Wing. Although the Greater God's domain's various powers had yet to discover the Eternal Realm's exact coordinates, many powers had already found methods to send players into the Eternal Realm. It was especially so for the various Apex powers. Virtually all of them already possessed such means. Moreover, the number of players they could send over was massive, which was why they had such an overwhelming advantage over the other powers in the current Eternal Realm. However, as mighty as they were, even the various Apex powers could not bring level 200+ players into the Eternal Realm. This was because of the restrictions imposed by the Eternal Realm's laws. Is this what you meant when you said Zero Wing can bring people into the Eternal Realm, Orbuth? Garut couldn't help but ask as he turned to look at Orbuth, Azure Fang's Saintess. Haven't I reported it to the guild leader long ago? Orbuth responded by looking at Garut strangely. But you never said Zero Wing can bring level 200+ players? Garut nearly lost his calm when he saw Orbuth's calm expression. Garut had long known about Zero Wing's ability to transport players into the Eternal Realm. This was because Orbuth had entered the Eternal Realm via Zero Wing's channel. Orbuth had even admitted to it herself. Hence, this matter was not a secret among Azure Fang's executives. In fact, Orbuth had even mentioned that so long as the various powers were willing to pay the price, Zero Wing could help them bring players into the Eternal Realm. Originally, Azure Fang's executives had scoffed at this matter. After all, it wouldn't matter how many players they brought into the Eternal Realm. No amount of players under level 200 would be enough to change the situation in the Eternal Realm. Even bringing several Tier 6 players wouldn't change the overall situation. This was because the various powers did not lack experts capable of advancing to Tier 6. However, it was a different story if Zero Wing could bring level 200+ players into the Eternal Realm. I might not have mentioned it, but none of you asked me, either, Orbuth calmly replied. Orbuth's response rendered Garut speechless. Unfortunately, there was nothing he could do about it. In reality, Orbuth couldn't be considered a full-fledged member of Azure Fang. She wasn't internally nurtured by the guild. Instead, she had only joined the guild because of an invitation from Azure Fang's guild leader, and her relationship with Azure Fang was more like a partnership than anything else. She was under no obligation to care about Azure Fang's interests. In such a situation, it was already fortunate she was willing to share her method of entering the Eternal Realm. While Garut and Orbuth were conversing, Phoenix Rain and the others had already thrown themselves at the Holy Guard's team leaders, giving the enemy no time to gather themselves. Meanwhile, in front of level 210+, Tier 6 players equipped with the Godchaser set, which provided basic attributes on par with level 220 legendary equipment, level 180, Tier 6 players were no more than infants before adults. Even if the Holy Guard's team leaders had been artificially strengthened to rival taboo-level existences, they were no exception. Boom, boom, boom. In the blink of an eye, over 10 Holy Guard team leaders were killed. The difference in basic attributes was too overwhelming. Even if the Holy Guard team leaders possessed superior combat standards, in a situation where they were severely disadvantaged in speed and power, they had no choice but to trade blows with Phoenix Rain and the others, which led to them losing HP rapidly. In just 10 seconds, Phoenix Rain and the others had already killed over 200 Holy Guard team leaders. During this time, although the Holy Guard's 17 vice commanders had tried to intervene, 8 of them had to work together just to distract Crimson Mist, who was only a level 200+ player. Naturally, they were even more helpless against Phoenix Rain and the others, and all they could do was watch as the Holy Guard's members were slaughtered. Meanwhile, when the various spectating powers saw this scene, they couldn't help but be flabbergasted. Taboo-level existences. In any of the pseudo-apex powers present, taboo-level existences were considered apex combatants. They were also the various pseudo-apex powers' biggest source of confidence. In the current Eternal Realm, even the various apex powers would be helpless against a force of several hundred taboo-level existences. Yet, this seemingly unstoppable force had become as fragile as an infant against Zero Wing's 14 members. Is this the real reason behind Black Flame's confidence? After observing Phoenix Rain's group for a while, Verdant Rainbow shifted her attention toward Chiffon, a rare smile forming on her face. I wonder what expression those Vice Alliance masters will make once they learn of this. Because of their fear of displeasing Demon's Gate, they even said I was overestimating Black Flame and warned me against using my privilege to raise his rank. In reality, Black Flame receiving a rank in the Divine Glory list's top 300 was an extremely controversial topic in the Seven Luminaries Alliance. Meanwhile, as Black Flame's primary advocate, Verdant Rainbow had been ridiculed by many in the Alliance. They all thought she was exaggerating her description of Black Flame, especially regarding his importance in resisting the various holy race powers. After all, Black Flame was only one person. He didn't even have a divine artifact. Yet, she had insisted on propping up Black Flame to strengthen Zero Wing. In their opinion, all she was doing was wasting resources. Be that as it may, the assistance of apex powers like Demon's Gate is still crucial in resisting the holy race, Your Highness. Without them, we would not be able to resist the holy race in the Eternal Realm, the elder standing beside Verdant Rainbow explained when he saw her delighted expression. I know that. Verdant Rainbow nodded. When she recalled Demon's Gate's reminder from before, her expression darkened. The Eternal Realm was vast and brimming with ancient resources. In their pursuit of these ancient resources, the human race and holy races engaged in numerous large-scale battles across the Eternal Realm. However, outside of the conflict in the World Arc, most of these conflicts remained hidden from non-apex powers. Currently, the various apex powers were already struggling to protect the human race's territory. If Demon's Gate were to cause a commotion in this situation, the human race would be put into a perilous situation in the Eternal Realm. As for whether Demon's Gate would dare make such a treacherous move, that wasn't even a question. After all, Demon's Gate was unlike the average guild. It was filled with a bunch of lunatics who would be willing to do anything. While Verdant Rainbow was having her conversation, the siege over the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp reached a conclusion. The Holy Guard, which originally began with over 10,000 players, had fewer than 2,000 players remaining. Meanwhile, although Zero Wing, Azure Fang, and the Red Dragon Nation had suffered many more casualties, most of their main force members remained alive. Moreover, it was only a matter of time before Zero Wing annihilated the Holy Guard. Should we use our final trump card, Commander Daystar? Heavenly Ape Saint tentatively asked when he saw the ugly look on Daystar. Although the Death Reborn combination Holy Art was one of the Holy Guard's trump cards, it wasn't the last of the Legion's trump cards. The Legion still had one more trump card to use. However, if this final trump card was used here, the Holy Guard's subsequent plans would be as good as forfeit. Zero Wing, is it? I will remember this humiliation. After fiercely glaring at Chiffon, who remained aboard the Silver Wing, Daystar commanded, "Everyone, retreat." Upon receiving Daystar's command, every surviving Holy Guard member took out a grey talisman from their bags and activated it. Immediately, holy power enveloped them, and they turned into streaks of light as they disappeared from the resurrection camp. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc. Please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3671, Chapter 745, All Sides Shocked. Chapter 3671, Chapter 745, All Sides Shocked. Chapter 745, All Sides Shocked. They're retreating? The Holy Guard is retreating? We won. We won. We defended the Resurrection Camp. When the remaining players in the Resurrection Camp saw the Holy Guard members suddenly turning into streaks of light and vanishing, they cheered in excitement. Although they already understood that victory would likely fall to them once Zero Wings level 200+ players revealed their strength, they also knew it would be a Pyrrhic victory. After all, the fact remained that the Holy Guard had over 10,000 Tier 6 players, while their 3 guilds barely had over 100. As evidence, even though their 3 guilds started the battle with over 150,000 players, they ended the battle with fewer than 30,000 players. If not for the 114 God Slayer combat puppets drawing most of the Holy Guard's attention, it wouldn't even be surprising if all of their Tier 5 players died in battle. Thank goodness we managed to hold on. When Fry saw the Holy Guard vanishing, she scanned the remaining players in the Resurrection Camp and breathed a sigh of relief. While Tier 5 players could no longer be considered main combatants in the current Eternal Realm, they still served as a necessary foundation for the various powers to increase their Tier 6 combatants. In this battle, where their opponents consisted entirely of Tier 6 Holy Race experts, Tier 5 players who were killed would likely lose 2 or 3 levels and enter a weakened state for several days at the very least. In more severe cases, they might even lose the ability to log into the game for 1 or 2 weeks. As for the Tier 5 players killed by the Holy Guard's God-ranked experts, they'd be fortunate if they only lost access to God's domain for a couple of weeks. If they were unlucky, they might even lose access to God's domain permanently. With the casualty rate of the defenders being at over 80%, the loss was undoubtedly tragic. In the Red Dragon Nation's case, it could no longer afford to participate in any large-scale battles for a short period. Its development across the Eternal Realm would also be severely affected. Fortunately, they ultimately managed to defend the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp. The World Ark was the first high-level world mode regional dungeon in the Eternal Realm. It was even home to Holy Ring City, a neutral city and a place for players to reincarnate as a mythical race. It was destined to become one of the Eternal Realm's central development zones, and there would be a steady streak of players coming to develop in it in the future. If the Red Dragon Nation could rely on the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp's astonishing income, it would not need to worry about its future development in the Eternal Realm. Above the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp. Should we give chase, guild leader? Hidden Soul asked through the team chat. They didn't teleport far away. My tracking skill shows they are only 50,000 yards from us. With the Silverwing's speed, we can catch up to them in less than a minute. As an assassin and a veteran of the battlefield, Hidden Soul had made it a habit to leave a tracking mark on her opponents. That way, she could always chase after her opponents should they escape. Currently, most of Zero Wing's Tier 6 main force members remain alive. Even without Azure Fang and the Red Dragon Nation's help, they could easily eliminate the Holy Guard's remaining forces. Never mind. As the saying goes, do not press a desperate foe too hard, Shifeng said, shaking his head as he looked in the direction where the Holy Guard had retreated. Our goal is to defend the Resurrection Camp. If we give chase, it might lead to the spectating powers trying to take advantage of the situation. The Holy Guard's fame was widespread in his previous life. Although Phoenix Rain's group was strong, he wouldn't dismiss the possibility of the Holy Guard having more hidden trump cards. It should be known that Daystar, in Shifeng's previous life, had single-handedly eradicated all life in a realm. Even when experts equipped with divine artifacts attempted to confront her, none returned alive. It was also this frightening capability that earned her the title of Arbiter of Death. Personally, Shifeng did not wish for Zero Wing's members to test Daystar's capabilities. He didn't dare gamble on whether Daystar currently possessed the frightening capability she exhibited in his previous life. This was also why he remained on standby on the Silverwing throughout the fight. Had Daystar displayed that capability, he would have promptly used the Silverwing to retreat with Zero Wing's main force members. Meanwhile, Hidden Soul and the others did not voice any opposition to Shifeng's decision. Immediately, they began instructing the surviving players to tidy up the battlefield. At the same time as the three guilds were starting to clean up the battlefield, a commotion erupted among the various spectating powers. Are you kidding me? The Holy Guard actually retreated? Incredible. Zero Wing actually defeated the Sun Dynasty that even the Seven Luminaries Alliance fears. After this battle, the Eternal Realm's power structure will most likely see a huge change. The executives of the various spectating powers were filled with disbelief when they saw the Holy Guard retreating in defeat. For a moment, they even suspected someone had cast an illusion on their magic mirrors. It should be known that Zero Wing was merely an upstart guild that had appeared with the Eternal Realm. Yet, not only did it manage to take out an advanced Dark Gold flying ship and over 100 advanced Dark Gold combat puppets, but it also had 14 level 200+, Tier 6 experts. Not even the various Apex powers could take out such strength in the current Eternal Realm. It was especially so for the level 200+, Tier 6 experts. So long as the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp had these 14 experts defending it, nobody in the current Eternal Realm could threaten Zero Wing's ownership over the Resurrection Camp. What should we do, Elder Sword? Titan asked worriedly as he turned to 19th Sword. Once news of this battle gets out, we'll most likely have great difficulty surviving in the World Arc. Previously, the various powers had distanced themselves from the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp due to concerns about Zero Wing's ability to defend it and potential retaliation from the Sun Dynasty. However, after Zero Wing's victory against the Holy Guard, one of the Sun Dynasty's 5 conquest legions, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp a fortress of seemingly impenetrable defenses. In fact, it might even surpass the safety of the Seven Luminaries Alliance's resurrection camps. Because of this, it could be foreseen that many powers would try to curry favor with Zero Wing. At that time, the Skylight Association's suffering would be the best greeting gift. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3672, Chapter 746, Battle Harvest. Chapter 3672, Chapter 746, Battle Harvest. Chapter 746, Battle Harvest. Crystal City of Secrets, Airport. Many flying ships from the various NPC cities and fortresses could be seen waiting to dock at the Crystal City's airport. The airport's 5-story waiting hall was also crowded with players waiting to travel to the Eternal Realm's high-level maps. Isn't this airport a little too crowded? A petite level 173 female berserker clad in silver armor bearing Scarecrow Fox's mark remarked as she looked at the long line snaking through the waiting hall. I wonder when our adventurer team will be able to have our own flying ship like the other powers. If we had our own flying ship, we wouldn't have to waste so much time waiting in line. That's not going to happen anytime soon. Little Garment, River Light, a level 180, Tier 6 cleric, remarked with a wry smile as he gazed at the petite female berserker. While flying ships might be commonplace in the greater god's domain, only pseudo-apex powers and above possess them in the Eternal Realm. Even conglomerates and upper-ranking hegemonic powers don't stand a chance of owning one. Fortunately, our adventurer team secured a medium private house in the Crystal City long ago. Otherwise, with the current influx of players, we might struggle to even enter the city, let alone board a flying ship. The petite female berserker was named Mirror Garment, and she was currently receiving training from Scarecrow Fox. She was the successor of one of the conglomerates backing Scarecrow Fox, and the adventurer team would usually go all out to help her grow. However, the problem was that the current Eternal Realm was a gathering place of the mighty, and Scarecrow Fox's status here could only be considered average. Because of this, the influence it could exert and the resources it could access were limited. It could not easily access an entire realm's resources like it could outside the Eternal Realm. I understand. Mirror Garment nodded. When she looked at the various conglomerates and upper-ranking hegemonic powers, peerless geniuses who were in the waiting hall, a hint of fighting spirit appeared in her eyes. It hadn't been easy for her to enter the Eternal Realm. Despite her status, she had to undergo fierce competition to earn a spot. Although Scarecrow Fox was a behemoth in the realm she hailed from, She recognized that the Eternal Realm was a haven for the exceptionally powerful. This notion was readily apparent from the state of the Crystal City's airport. Throughout the waiting area, peerless geniuses could be spotted. In their respective realms, these individuals would be regarded as renowned figures. However, within the Crystal City of Secrets, these peerless geniuses were merely insignificant figures. If we can acquire more combat secret treasures or a couple of extraordinary secret treasures from the World Ark this time, having a flying ship sent over from the Greater God's domain wouldn't be out of the question, Cheline said, smiling when she saw the fighting spirit on Mirror Garment's face. Also, if you're lucky, you might even get to register at one of the Inner Area's resurrection camps on this trip. The Inner Area? Are you for real, Big Sis Cheline? Mirror Garment asked as she looked at Cheline with fiery eyes. Although she had only recently arrived at the Eternal Realm, she had overheard many players discussing the World Ark while exploring the underground Crystal Palace and Crystal City of Secrets. The World Ark was currently a place of contention for many powers, and its inner area was so dangerous that even members of pseudo-apex powers were at high risk of death. Because of this, it became mandatory for players to register themselves at an inner area resurrection camp if they wanted to explore the World Ark's inner area effectively. The only problem was that this privilege was not easily obtained. Even the members of the various pseudo-apex powers had difficulty securing a spot. If she could register at a resurrection camp in the inner area, she could explore the inner area more efficiently and find more opportunities for growth. Naturally, Cheline said, chuckling. Scarecrow Fox might be insignificant in the Crystal City, but we have a good relationship with Zero Wing. Acquiring a registration slot shouldn't be too difficult. Zero Wing? Mirror Garment was unfamiliar with the name Cheline mentioned. Even after searching through all the information she had of pseudo-apex powers in her mind, she could not remember ever hearing this name before. However, Mirror Garment was no fool. Based on Cheline's prideful tone when she spoke of Scarecrow Fox's relationship with Zero Wing, she could tell that Zero Wing was no ordinary power. As Cheline was about to provide Mirror Garment a detailed explanation, a nearby team overheard their conversation, and a level 181, Tier 6 swordsman from the team suddenly approached them. The swordsman in question was a middle-aged man clad in armor adorned with a sword emblem, and trailing behind him was a young man who was also a Tier 6 swordsman. The Blade Master Society. Mirror Garment gasped when she saw the approaching middle-aged swordsman. The Blade Master Society was an adventurer team renowned in the Greater God's domain, its reputation surpassing even Scarecrow Fox. The Society's two commanders, both bearing the title of Blade Master, were particularly celebrated for their strength, being only marginally weaker than Scarecrow Fox's legendary Great Commander. Greetings, Vice Commander Cheline. I am Ocean Watcher, a Vice Commander of the Blade Master Society. The middle-aged swordsman introduced himself respectfully. I couldn't help but overhear you mentioning your relationship with Zero Wing, Vice Commander Cheline. If it is not too much to ask, can I trouble you for an introduction? Just a chance to meet with Zero Wing will do. You don't have to say anything on the Blade Master Society's behalf. Regardless of success or failure, we will offer this extraordinary secret treasure for your troubles. Ocean Watcher? The ocean-slicing sword god. Mirror Garment gaped in shock when she heard the middle-aged swordsman's introduction. The ocean-slicing sword god was well known across the Greater God's domain. He was an expert ranked among the Divine Glory list's top 100, and even pseudo-apex powers had to treat him with a certain degree of respect. Yet, after hearing that Scarecrow Fox shared a good relationship with Zero Wing, Ocean Watcher was willing to humble himself before Cheline, even going as far as to offer an incomparably precious extraordinary secret treasure just to get a recommendation from Cheline. This situation piqued Mirror Garment's curiosity toward the guild known as Zero Wing. Just what kind of power could compel a top 100 Divine Glory expert to exhibit such caution and deference? I cannot promise you a meeting, Cheline answered after pondering the matter. It all depends on guild leader Black Flame's willingness. That is only natural. When Ocean Watcher didn't hear an outright refusal from Cheline, a hint of excitement appeared on his face. His reaction also caused the young Tier 6 swordsman beside him to scrutinize Mirror Garment seriously, treating her like a powerful rival. Seeing this, Mirror Garment couldn't help but be filled with disbelief. While the interaction between Scarecrow Fox and the Blademaster Society was taking place, over at the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp. "We've finished cleaning up the battlefield," Guild Leader, Gentle Snow said as she entered the advanced tent occupied by Zero Wing's executives, who were in the middle of sorting through the loot acquired from the Sun Dynasty's 3 subordinate guilds. Then, she handed Shifeng a list and excitedly reported, "Not only did we not incur any losses in this battle, but we even made a fortune. In addition, as soon as the battle concluded, many powers contacted us asking to buy long-term registration slots. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 3673, Chapter 747, Ring City Royal Order. Chapter 3673, Chapter 747, Ring City Royal Order. Chapter 747, Ring City Royal Order. Following Gentle Snow's excited statement, Hidden Soul and the others couldn't help but chuckle. These powers are the very definition of opportunists. Before we fought the Sun Dynasty, none of them were willing to enter a long-term partnership with us. Yet, now that we have repelled the Sun Dynasty, all of them are suddenly interested in doing so. Fire Dance and Rampant Blade curled their lips in disdain when they heard about the various powers' behavior. "It's normal," Shifeng said, unsurprised by the behavior of the various powers. Chuckling, he said, "Not even the 7 Luminaries Alliance will want to provoke the Sun Dynasty if it can avoid doing so. Meanwhile, Zero Wing is only an upstart guild in the Eternal Realm. How could the various powers possibly dare bet on us?" "Indeed." Hidden Soul nodded in agreement. Then, she added, "Even so, we can't let them benefit off us so easily. Setting aside the resurrection slots we need to reserve for our 3 guilds, we should strictly limit how many slots we share with others. Otherwise, the wait time is going to become a problem." "How many slots do you think we should offer them, Guild Leader?" Gentle Snow asked as she looked at Shifeng. Although the World Ark's resurrection camps didn't have a theoretical limit on how many players they could register, they could only resurrect a limited number of players each time. If the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp only had a user base of about 100,000, it would have no problem handling the potential traffic. However, it would be a different story if the user base reached 1 million or more. If too many players sought to be resurrected simultaneously, they'd have to wait a long time for their turn. If the wait time ended up being as long as it would take players to travel from the nearest NPC city to the World Ark, there'd be no point in registering at the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp. Based on the distance between our resurrection camp and the nearest NPC city, we should hit our maximum capacity at 500,000 players. We will need to reserve 60,000 for our 3 guilds and 200,000 for other players out of these slots. So, let the various powers compete for 140,000 slots for now and set the price at 30 eternal silver per slot," Shifeng said after some thought. "As for the remaining slots, we'll gradually distribute them as more Tier 6 players appear." The World Ark's inner area was different from the outer area. Although Tier 5 players could explore the inner area, their chances of encountering Holy Race players were significantly greater. Meanwhile, with the Holy Race having far more Tier 6 players than the human race, the chances of Tier 5 human players dying in the inner area would be incredibly high. So, even if the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp registered only 400,000 players, registered players might need to wait half a day just to get resurrected. "I'll make the necessary arrangements," Gentle Snow said, nodding. After Gentle Snow left the tent, Shifeng turned his attention toward the list Gentle Snow had handed to him. It was a list showing the items they acquired from the Holy Guard. Prior to the battle, Zero Wing, Azure Fang, and the Red Dragon Nation had already agreed that any loot acquired during the defensive siege would go to whichever guild was responsible for obtaining it in the first place. Meanwhile, with Zero Wing's members being responsible for over 90% of the Holy Guard members killed, it meant that over 90% of the loot obtained went to Zero Wing. So, Zero Wing's harvest was very fruitful. The Holy Guard was one of the Sun Dynasty's 5 conquest legions, so it went without saying that the equipment standard of its members was excellent. Even the most inferior equipment they dropped was at the fragmented legendary rank. The only problem was that most of the weapons and equipment dropped by the Holy Guard members could only be equipped by Holy Race players. In the hands of human players, they were utterly useless. Even so, the amount of usable loot Zero Wing acquired still astonished Shifeng. There are actually 2,487 universal fragmented legendary items. No wonder she said we made a fortune. Shifeng couldn't help but gasp a little as he looked at the list in his hand. Zero Wing had expended a lot of 7 Luminaries crystals for mobilizing the God Slayer combat puppets in the defensive siege. More specifically, out of the 570,000 units prepared, less than 200,000 units remained. Fortunately, Zero Wing had won the battle, which eliminated the need to compensate guild members for losses related to weapons and equipment. Instead, Zero Wing would only need to compensate guild members for the loss of levels and contributions made during the battle. After calculating the guild contribution points required for these compensations, 2,000 fragmented legendary items should be more than enough for Zero Wing to break even. Essentially, Zero Wing had made a profit of 487 fragmented legendary items in this battle. This was nearly enough to fully equip a 50-man team with fragmented legendary items. Under normal circumstances, the current Zero Wing would need at least a month to acquire nearly 500 fragmented legendary items. Moreover, this was only because of the Eternal Realm's favorable circumstances. Outside of the Eternal Realm, Zero Wing would probably need several months to acquire so many fragmented legendary items. It would be great if I could turn the Holy Race's exclusive weapons and equipment into usable resources right away. When Shifeng looked at the 10,000+ fragmented legendary items usable by only Holy Race players on the list, he couldn't help but sigh in dejection. Weapons and equipment exclusive to the Holy Race were utterly useless to human players. Normally, if players wished to convert these items into usable resources, they could only do so by auctioning them off at a neutral city's auction house. Although they would incur a hefty processing fee, they could sell these unusable items to Holy Race players for eternal coins. However, none of the Eternal Realm's neutral cities had been activated thus far, so such transactions were not yet possible. While Shifeng could also convert these exclusive items using the origin myth, it wasn't worth doing so. After all, 7 Luminaries crystals were incredibly precious and strategic resources. They were even more valuable than fragmented legendary items in a certain sense. This is a Ring City Royal Order. Shifeng's eyes suddenly widened when he noticed a particular item on the list. What's wrong, guild leader? Hidden Soul asked out of curiosity when she noticed the sudden change in Shifeng's expression. Aside from Hidden Soul, everyone else in the tent also noticed Shifeng's surprised reaction, and they couldn't help but turn to look at him. Although most of the players in the tent had yet to reach the 5th floor standard, they were still 4th floor experts. Hence, no changes occurring within their perception range could escape their notice. It's nothing bad. Our guild has simply struck gold, Shifeng said, chuckling when he saw Hidden Soul and the others looking at him. Hearing Shifeng's response, Hidden Soul and the others couldn't help but roll their eyes at him for stating the obvious. You guys, Shifeng couldn't help but feel exasperated by the looks of disdain Hidden Soul and the others were giving him. However, he refrained from explaining himself and retrieved a tattered scroll from the epic spatial bag that Gentle Snow had passed him along with the list just now. The Ring City Royal Orders, also known as the Ring City's 12 Aristocrat. Holy Ring City had 12 aristocratic positions, specifically 6 Viscounts, 4 Counts, and 2 Dukes. They were established by the first City Lord, and they coincided with the 12 official fiefs that covered the World Ark's core area around Holy Ring City. Indeed, the only way for players to acquire a guild city in the World Ark, the first high-level world mode regional dungeon in the Eternal Realm, was by becoming one of Holy Ring City's 12 aristocrats and acquiring an official fief. So long as a power could succeed in doing so, they would gain access to unimaginable wealth. Meanwhile, the tattered scroll in Shifeng's hand was none other than the Ring City Royal Order necessary to become one of the 12 aristocrats. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3674, Chapter 748, Battle of the Four Royals. Chapter 3674, Chapter 748, Battle of the Four Royals. Chapter 748, Battle of the Four Royals. To be able to find something like this, the Holy Guard truly is incredible. Shifeng briefly fell into a daze as he looked at the tattered scroll. The Ring City Royal Order wasn't something that could be acquired easily. Even though the one currently in Shifeng's possession was only an incomplete fragment, its value still exceeded that of a divine weapon. Under the right circumstances, it could even be worth multiple divine weapons. This was because the World Ark was one of the Eternal Realm's few world mode regional dungeons. Simply the fact that the monsters here could drop extraordinary secret treasures and above already made it an invaluable location, let alone the fact that it also housed various resources and/or veins that couldn't be found elsewhere. Most importantly, the World Ark was home to Holy Ring City. At first glance, Holy Ring City might not seem special. After all, although neutral cities weren't everywhere in the Eternal Realm, there were still quite many. However, Holy Ring City's true value quickly presented itself once the various powers discovered the Eternal Realm's coordinates in the Void Sea. A city of absolute neutrality. Of course, this doesn't mean the other neutral cities of the Eternal Realm weren't genuinely maintaining a neutral stance. Instead, the issue was that most of these neutral cities could no longer uphold their neutrality once various powers discovered the Eternal Realm's coordinates, even if they intended to do so. However, Holy Ring City was different. As mighty as the Holy Race's royal powers were, not even they could do anything about it. In fact, not even the legendary Battle of the Four Royals had managed to bring down the city. The Battle of the Four Royals. It was a battle that shook the greater gods' domains of both the human race and the holy race. In Shifeng's previous life, there wasn't a single player in either greater god's domain who did not know about that battle. It was such a spectacle that it was even broadcast live in the real world for all humans to see. Shortly after the Eternal Realm appeared, the players of both greater god's domain already understood the value it held. Hence, both human and holy race players were adamant about controlling the entire Eternal Realm. Meanwhile, the places where the most wealth was gathered across the entire Eternal Realm were none other than the Eternal Realm's neutral cities. Hence, once the Eternal Realm's coordinates in the Void Sea were discovered, the powers of both greater gods' domain promptly started to capture the Eternal Realm's neutral cities one after another. When all but Holy Ring City remained unoccupied, 4 of the Holy Race's 10 royal powers decided to compete over the city, which led to a battle of epic proportions. The battle at the time was of a scale that had never been seen in the history of the human race's greater god's domain. At the time, even apex powers like the 7 Luminaries Alliance could only watch from the sidelines, powerless to interfere. However, contrary to everyone's expectations, none of the 4 royal powers managed to capture Holy Ring City. Instead, the Battle of the Four Royals had concluded with the defeat of all 4 royal powers, the outcome shocking everyone. Meanwhile, after the Battle of the Four Royals, whether it was the human powers or the Holy Race powers, everyone understood one thing: Holy Ring City's neutrality could not be threatened. This discovery instantly led to Holy Ring City's value skyrocketing by over 10,000-fold. Naturally, the value of Holy Ring City's 12 aristocratic positions also skyrocketed. Presently, although the value of the 12 aristocratic positions was nowhere near as high as it was in Shifeng's previous life, they were still vastly more valuable than any resurrection camp. After all, the sole purpose of resurrection camps was to provide players with a place to resurrect inside the World Ark. In contrast, the guild towns and cities situated on Holy Ring City's official fiefs came with all the standard features and more. Whether it was resurrection or accommodation, these were merely the basics of what they had to offer. What made them truly valuable was the right to facilitate trade between players and other cities. As these guild towns and cities were affiliated with Holy Ring City, a neutral city, the trades they could facilitate were not limited by race. For example, human players weren't restricted to trading with other human players only. Instead, they could trade with players of other races. It was also the case for city trades. These guild towns and cities weren't limited to trading with only human cities. Instead, they could also trade with holy race cities. In Shifeng's previous life, The four royal powers had gained control over 80% of Holy Ring City's fiefs after failing to capture Holy Ring City. Because of this, they established an absolute authority over neutral trades and generated wealth far beyond the imaginations of the six other royal powers. Only 1/5. Shifeng had mixed feelings as he looked at the tattered scroll in his possession. Honestly, he had never thought about getting his hands on a Ring City royal order before today. To be given a glimmer of hope now was truly an uncomfortable experience. It should be known that acquiring a complete Ring City royal order was mind-bogglingly difficult. It wasn't a challenge that could be accomplished by just one individual or a powerful team. The only reliable method to obtain Ring City royal orders he knew of could easily instill despair into any existing apex power. This was because this method required players to take over an entire foreign realm. It was also why, on the Holy Race's side, only royal powers had managed to acquire Holy Ring City's official fiefs. Currently, the Ring City royal order in his possession was only one of 5 fragments. To secure one of the 12 aristocratic positions, he would have to gather the remaining 4 fragments. However, every Ring City royal order and their fragments were unique. This meant that, even if players got their hands on multiple fragments, it was possible that they weren't fragments of the same royal order. Of course, the system would show some mercy to players who successfully obtained fragments of a Ring City royal order. So long as players managed to collect 1/5 of a royal order, they could complete the rest by paying Holy Ring City to start a foreign realm crusade. They wouldn't need to rely entirely on luck. Although Shifeng did not know from where in the World Ark's core area the Holy Guard managed to obtain this fragment, the fact that it made up 1/5 of a complete royal order meant that he already had the opportunity to obtain a complete royal order. However, Shifeng was also aware that while the current Zero Wing already had the strength to suppress the Holy Race's top combatants, it was a different story when it came to capturing an entire realm from the Holy Race. If Zero Wing were to go on such a crusade, it would have to go up against a realm that had existed for hundreds, if not thousands, or possibly even tens of thousands of years. Moreover, the Holy Race players operating in said realm would not be under any suppression or restrictions. Against such opponents, Zero Wing's current strength would be nothing but a joke. This was also why he did not reveal the Ring City royal order to Hidden Soul and the others right away. Wait. What if? Looking at the Ring City royal order, Shifeng suddenly thought of a possibility. What if I used the Origin Myth? The Origin Myth was the Origin Sanctuary's most prized possession, capable of forcibly modifying even divine artifacts. With the Ring City royal order being only a legendary item, there was no way the Origin Myth couldn't modify it. Thinking up to this point, Shifeng promptly moved the fragmented Ring City royal order into the Origin Myth's origin space. No matter what, he had to try and see if he could repair the legendary rank Ring City royal order. However, after putting in the royal order, Shifeng did not receive a response from the Origin Myth. It wasn't until 30 seconds had passed that a system notification echoed in his mind. System, Origin Space has detected the legendary Ring City royal order. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3675, Chapter 749, Building a Town. Chapter 3675, Chapter 749, Building a Town. Chapter 749, Building a Town. It works? Shifeng revealed a look of joy when he saw the system notification. If the Origin Space showed no reaction, it meant that the Ring City royal order couldn't be repaired. However, so long as the Origin Space showed a reaction, it meant that it was possible to make changes to the royal order. Subsequently, time passed by in silence as Shifeng patiently watched the progress bar above the Origin Space fill up. At the 3-minute mark, another system notification sounded in Shifeng's mind. System, Origin Space has detected the Ring City royal order. Do you wish to repair it? System, repairing the Ring City royal order will cost 50 million units of 7 luminaries crystal. Do you wish to proceed? 50 million? Shifeng gasped when he saw the cost. It should be known that modifying the legendary rank Abyss Workshop certification only cost 6 million units of 7 luminaries crystal previously. Yet, The legendary rank Ring City Royal Order cost a whopping 50 million. This was already close to matching the cost of modifying a divine artifact. Meanwhile, an expenditure of 50 million units of 7 luminaries crystal definitely wasn't something the current Zero Wing could afford. After deducting the 7 luminaries crystals spent on strengthening the Silver Wing and covering the costs of the defensive siege, Zero Wing only had a little over 7 million units remaining. Zero Wing would need a considerable amount of time to make up the difference. Not to mention, the various powers in the current Eternal Realm were fervently nurturing Tier 6 players, and Zero Wing was no exception. This, in turn, would make it even more difficult for Zero Wing to save up 50 million units of 7 luminaries crystal. Contact Fry and Garut for me, Soul. After pondering for a moment, Shifeng took a deep breath and issued a command to Hidden Soul. Ask them if they can come up with a total of 50 million units of 7 luminaries crystal. Tell them that Zero Wing intends to conduct a big transaction with them. 50 million? Hidden Soul couldn't help but look at Shifeng in surprise and confusion. What are you planning, guild leader? A sum of 50 million units of 7 luminaries crystal was enough to let 500 Tier 5 experts challenge their Tier 6 promotion. Not even Apex powers could come up with such a large sum on short notice. Aside from Hidden Soul, Phoenix Rain and the others in the tent also couldn't help but look at Shifeng in astonishment. Even if they sold their home god's domain, they doubted they could come up with such a large sum of 7 luminaries crystals. Just contact them for me for now. I will tell you all about it later, Shifeng said, not bothering to explain himself. There was no need to question whether it would be worth spending 50 million units of 7 luminaries crystal to repair the Ring City Royal Order. It was worth it. It was absolutely worth it. When operating the World Ark's resurrection camps, players could only charge eternal coins for the services they offered. However, in the towns and cities built on Holy Ring City's 12 fiefs, players could set the currency they charged for services such as auction houses, shops, and private houses. In other words, players could change their collected currency into 7 luminaries crystals. In his previous life, the 4 royal powers that occupied over 80% of the official fiefs made it mandatory to use holy power crystals, a strategic resource for the holy race, when doing business at their auction houses. This, in turn, meant that holy race players wishing to purchase items from human players had to use holy power crystals to pay the auction house's processing fees. Because of this, the 4 royal powers made a huge fortune, raking in millions of units of holy power crystals every day. Meanwhile, all the various powers could do was watch on enviously. Now that Shifeng had the opportunity to get his hands on a complete Ring City Royal Order, he'd be willing to pay even 500 million units of 7 luminaries crystal if it meant he could secure it, let alone 50 million units. After Shifeng waited for about 15 minutes, Hidden Soul returned to the tent with Fry and Garut in tow. We're here, Guild Leader Black Flame. What is this business proposition that you have for us? Garut asked as he looked at Shifeng curiously. 50 million units of 7 luminaries crystal is no small amount. Even if Azure Fang and the Red Dragon Nation work together, we'd have to empty our pockets to come up with such a sum. Could Zero Wing be planning to sell some of its shares over the resurrection camp? Fry asked as she scrutinized Shifeng. 7 luminaries crystals were of utmost importance to the various powers in the current Eternal Realm. They would not trade them away unless absolutely necessary. After all, there was no power that did not want more Tier 6 players under their command. Only by having more Tier 6 players could they explore the Eternal Realm more effectively. Although the Eternal Realm was relatively abundant in 7 luminaries crystals, their demand was still vastly greater. As a result, the various powers still had to import most of their 7 luminaries crystals from outside the Eternal Realm, incurring a steep cost in the process. Unless Zero Wing could offer something that could tempt their respective guilds, even if the two of them were willing to do Zero Wing a favor, the executives of their respective guilds were unlikely to play ball. Meanwhile, out of everything Fry could think of, the only thing of value Zero Wing could offer was its shares of the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp. The battle against the Sun Dynasty's Holy Guard had proven the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp's defenses to be impregnable. Because of this, players were coming in droves to register at the Resurrection Camp, causing the camp's income to increase several times. At this time, it wouldn't even be an exaggeration to call the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp the most lucrative location in the human race's territory. Most importantly, this wasn't even the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp's limit, as the number of players registering at the camp was still increasing steadily. Hence, if Zero Wing were to offer up some of its shares over the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp, the executives of Azure Fang and the Red Dragon Nation definitely wouldn't mind paying huge sums of 7 luminaries crystals for them. No. Shifeng shook his head. No. Garut grew even more curious when he saw Shifeng shaking his head. Could it be those combat puppets, then? It would be interesting if that's the case, Fry said, feeling a little excited. If there was anything else Zero Wing had that was of value to Azure Fang and the Red Dragon Nation, it would have to be the Silverwing flying ship and Godslayer combat puppets. However, not even for a moment did Fry think that Zero Wing might sell the Silverwing flying ship. After all, even outside the Eternal Realm, the flying ship was a priceless treasure, let alone in the Eternal Realm. This left only the Godslayer combat puppets. Although nowhere near as valuable as the Silverwing, the combat power they possessed could still be considered extraordinary in the current Eternal Realm. If the Red Dragon Nation could get its hands on a batch of Godslayer combat puppets, its exploration of the world arc could be improved greatly. It would no longer have to worry about lacking Tier 6 players. That's not it, either, Shifeng said, chuckling. We give up, Guild Leader Black Flame. Just tell us what you're trying to sell us, Fry said, feeling a little confused. If it's not too much of a problem, we can probably convince our guild's other executives to agree to this matter. Garut nodded in agreement with Fry's words. They regarded their partnership with Zero Wing highly. So long as Shifeng wasn't making them incur a major loss, they wouldn't mind giving him 50 million units of 7 luminaries crystal. A town, Shifeng declared with a smile. Zero Wing intends to construct a town in the World Arc's core area. Are you two willing to spend 25 million units of 7 luminaries crystal each to permanently purchase one large shop and one large land there? If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3676, Chapter 750, 2-star count. Chapter 3676, Chapter 750, 2-star count. Chapter 750, 2-star count. Real estate for a town in the World Arc's core area? You're not joking with us, are you, Guild Leader Black Flame? When Fry and Garut heard Shifeng's words, they looked at him with bloodshot eyes and bated breaths. Their voices also trembled as they spoke, neither daring to believe the validity of Shifeng's words. The World Arc was the only high-level world mode regional dungeon activated in the Eternal Realm. Because of this, even the competition in the World Arc's inner area was already incredibly intense. As evidence, as soon as their 3 guilds had proven themselves capable of defending the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp, numerous powers had come forth, offering to pay astronomical prices just to secure some resurrection slots. Meanwhile, this situation was already enough to make them wonder if they were in a dream. As for occupying a guild town in the World Arc's core area, even if they were only limited to occupying a shop and a plot of land in said town, it was not something they would dare to dream of accomplishing. In fact, not even the various apex powers would dare think of accomplishing such a thing in the current Eternal Realm. It should be known that currently, even the human race's various apex powers were having great difficulty surviving and exploring the World Arc's core area. As for the human race's other powers, the core area was a forbidden land that was absolutely off-limits for them. However, if one could secure a place to rest in the World Arc's core area, one would gain unimaginable advantages when exploring it. At this time, Fry and Garut weren't the only ones shocked by Shifeng's words. Hidden Soul and the other Zero Wing executives present in the tent were similarly dumbfounded. They might have reacted with even greater excitement if not for Fry and Garut's presence. After all, the advantages Zero Wing could gain from having a guild town in the World Arc were leagues above what it could gain from a resurrection camp. Firstly, Zero Wing could construct a guild residence in the guild town. This, in turn, meant that Zero Wing's members could teleport directly to the World Arc's core area using guild transfer scrolls. Secondly, Guild members could get proper rest in the World Ark and trade various resources with each other in a relatively safe environment. With these two advantages alone, Zero Wing could easily triumph over the various powers in the World Ark. I'm not joking. If you two don't believe me, we can establish a God's Domain contract for this transaction, Shifeng said, chuckling when he saw Fry and Garut's excited response. What do you think? Are you two willing to carry out this transaction? I accept on the Red Dragon Nation's behalf. Fry answered without hesitation, behaving like she was afraid Shifeng would go back on his word. Immediately afterward, she contacted the Red Dragon Nation's other executives to start gathering 7 Luminaries crystals. Azure Fang is also in. Although Garut answered a second later than Fry, his speed in contacting Azure Fang's other executives was not at all slower than Fry's. Give me half a day, and I'll get you your 25 million units, Guild Leader Black Flame. Meanwhile, after Fry and Garut agreed to Shifeng's business proposal on behalf of their respective guilds, they quickly signed a God's Domain contract over the transaction. The contract required Azure Fang and the Red Dragon Nation to provide 25 million units of 7 Luminaries crystal to Zero Wing each. In return, once Zero Wing finished constructing its guild town in the World Ark's core area, they would each gain permanent ownership over a large shop and a large land in the guild town. Aren't we acting a little too hastily, guild leader? After seeing Fry and Garut leave the tent, Hidden Soul worriedly said to Shifeng, although the two of them are unlikely to expose this matter, we can't say the same for their guild's executives. Phoenix Rain and Gentle Snow, Zero Wing's other vice guild leaders, nodded in agreement. They similarly felt that Shifeng's behavior this time was incredibly risky. The World Ark was currently the primary target of contention for the Holy Race's royal powers and the human race's apex powers. Meanwhile, Zero Wing had only recently defeated the Sun Dynasty's Holy Guard and stabilized its foothold in the World Ark's inner area. If Zero Wing tried to occupy a large number of advantages in the core area right away, even the human race's various powers wouldn't tolerate it, let alone the Holy Race's various powers. After all, the advantages a guild town could provide were simply massive. It simply wasn't something that a resurrection camp could compete against. The nail that sticks out gets hammered down. This was a simple principle that occurred almost constantly in God's Domain. If Zero Wing's only opponent was the Sun Dynasty, it could still more or less survive. However, if Zero Wing had to go up against a bunch of apex powers and royal powers, the only outcome awaiting it would be death. Ultimately, Zero Wing could only surrender its guild town to the various apex and royal powers. Don't worry. Nobody can take away Zero Wing's possessions, Shifeng said, chuckling. He did not bother to explain his decision. If Zero Wing's guild town was constructed in any other location, he would have indeed had to worry about defending it. However, he would have no such concern if he constructed it on one of Holy Ring City's 12 official fiefs. In God's Domain, the main god system would usually grant newly constructed guild towns a 1-month buffer period. If the town was attacked during this buffer period, the NPC power the town was affiliated with would step forward to protect it. In other words, if anyone were to attack a guild town constructed on one of the 12 official fiefs, they would have to prepare themselves to face the wrath of Holy Ring City. It should be known that Holy Ring City was the sole neutral city that retained its status of neutrality in the Eternal Realm during Shifeng's previous life. Not even the might of 4 royal powers could threaten it back then, let alone now. Meanwhile, a month was enough for Zero Wing to amass a fortune through its town. Paired with its medium world fragment and the players from Shifeng's home God's Domain, Zero Wing could mass-produce level 210+, Tier 6 experts. At that time, it'd be the various powers who'd have to be afraid of Zero Wing, not the other way around. Half a day later, Fry and Garut personally delivered 50 million units of 7 Luminaries crystal to Shifeng, neither of them letting others interfere throughout the process. Evidently, they knew it would be in their best interest to let as few people as possible know about this transaction. Meanwhile, after Shifeng saw the two off, he returned to his advanced tent and used the origin myth to repair the Ring City Royal Order without hesitation. As soon as Shifeng injected the 50 million units of 7 Luminaries crystal into the origin space, the tattered scroll in the origin space started to recover at a visible rate. In only a minute, A brand new scroll made of sheepskin appeared before Shifeng. Fourth Ring City Royal Order, inferior divine artifact rank item, one of the 12 title certificates conferred by the first City Lord of Holy Ring City. The owner of this certificate will be granted the title of a 2-star count and the Shadow Ring Basin as their fief. As long as the holder of this certificate is in the World Arc, they can teleport to any location in the connected fief at any time. Additionally, the holder of this certificate has the privilege of constructing one guild town on their fief at no cost. A 2-star count. Shifeng was momentarily stunned when he saw the description of the Ring City Royal Order. There were 12 Ring City Royal Orders, each granting a different starting rank. Among them, 6 granted players the Viscount rank, 4 granted the Count rank, and 2 granted the Duke rank. These 3 major ranks could further split into multiple minor ranks. In the case of Counts, they could be split into 3 minor ranks, starting from the 1-star status and ending at the 3-star status. Of the 4 royal orders that granted a starting rank of Count, 1 started players as a 3-star count, 1 started as a 2-star count, and the remaining 2 started as a 1-star count. After gaining an aristocratic position, players could raise their ranks by completing Holy Ring City's quests. Meanwhile, the higher a player's rank, the greater the authority they could wield in Holy Ring City. The differences would start to become especially apparent starting from the Count rank. For example, although a 2-star count was only 1 minor rank above 1-star counts, they gained the privilege of constructing an advanced town directly on their fief. They wouldn't need to start from a basic town like 1-star counts. Meanwhile, an advanced town was not only 4 times larger than a basic town, but it also had the privilege of trading with one neutral city. In his previous life, several Apex powers had to work together just to acquire a 2-star Viscount rank. Then, they had to go through even more effort to develop it into a 2-star count so that they could upgrade their basic town into an advanced town. Yet, in this life, he got to start as a 2-star count directly. System: do you wish to construct an advanced town on your fief immediately? If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3677, Chapter 751, Mythical Era City. Chapter 3677, Chapter 751, Mythical Era City. Chapter 751, Mythical Era City. Did something happen, guild leader? Hidden Soul asked anxiously when she noticed Shifeng looking dazed. Now that Zero Wing had already formalized its new partnership with Azure Fang and the Red Dragon Nation, it wouldn't be long before the various powers learned of Zero Wing's intent to construct a city in the World Arc's core area. If a problem were to crop up at this juncture, it would be terrible news for Zero Wing. Don't worry, it's something good, Shifeng said after choosing to proceed with the advanced town's construction. Then, he commanded, bring over all the earnings we made from the resurrection camp. Actually, no, bring me as much money as you can get your hands on. I have a great use for it. When the several Apex powers successfully upgraded their basic town into an advanced town, it instantly became the target of envy for the various human powers. Even Shifeng couldn't help but covet it. Originally, Shifeng thought he'd be fortunate to start as a 2-star or 3-star Viscount. If that were the case, it'd be a long while before Zero Wing could have an advanced town in the World Arc. After all, raising one's aristocratic rank in Holy Ring City was no easy task. However, now that Zero Wing could construct an advanced town directly, he'd have to change up his plans a little. It should be known that, upon reaching the advanced rank, guild towns operating under Holy Ring City would remain exceptional entities even until the Eternal Realm's middle stages. This was due to their gaining access to an advanced feature, namely the ability to establish a teleportation trade route with one other neutral city outside of Holy Ring City in the Eternal Realm. Indeed, every advanced town operating under Holy Ring City could let players teleport to one pre-designated neutral city located in the Eternal Realm, saving them a lot of time and the need to carry the risks of traveling across great distances. Human players could even trade with Holy Race players, depending on the neutral city's location. Of course, this feature wasn't without its flaws. In addition to being a one-way teleportation, the teleportation itself costs a hefty sum. In Shifeng's previous life, the advanced town operated by the several apex powers charged each player 100 units of 7 luminaries crystal to teleport to the neutral city it was connected with. Even outside the Eternal Realm, this costly fee could make many Tier 6 experts wince in pain, let alone in the Eternal Realm during its early and middle stages. Even so, many independent players and experts from the various powers were willing to pay this costly teleportation fee in his previous life. This was because there were very few neutral cities that players could actually enter during the Eternal Realm's early and middle stages. Aside from being far from civilization, they also had stringent entry conditions. They weren't places where players could enter whenever they wanted. In comparison, the price of 100 units of 7 luminaries crystal could be considered dirt cheap. With the current Eternal Realm still in its early stages, there should be very few players capable of entering neutral cities. Meanwhile, with the value of neutral cities, having the ability to teleport to one was akin to gaining access to a gold mine. So long as Zero Wing had enough money, it could purchase all kinds of real estate in bulk. Although almost all of these neutral cities would become unsafe once the Eternal Realm entered its later stages, by the time that period arrived, Zero Wing would have made far more money than it had invested. Not to mention, every neutral city had its own unique resources. There is 234,431 eternal gold inside, Guild Leader, Hidden Soul reported as she handed a spatial bag containing eternal gold coins to Shifeng. Aside from the 42,135 eternal gold the camp made today, 55,412 eternal gold came from the camp's operations before today, and 136,704 eternal gold came from our recent operations in the Crystal City. If you still need more, Snow should be able to secure another 30 or 40,000 eternal gold by today if she sells some of the warehouse's common and combat secret treasures. Leave the secret treasures in the warehouse, save them for the new members we recruit. This much money should be enough for now, Shifeng said as he put the eternal coins away. Then, after managing his affairs in the Resurrection Camp, he promptly used the Ring City Royal Order to teleport to the Shadow Ring Basin. World Arc, Core Area, Shadow Ring Basin. On a vast plain shrouded in darkness stood a town enveloped in a magic barrier. While walking slowly toward the teleportation hall situated in the center of the town, Shifeng quietly admired the buildings inside the isolated town. System. Construction of Shadow Ring Town is completed. The town will be open to NPCs in 1 natural day. The town will be fully opened to players in 2 natural days. System. As Shadow Ring Town is newly constructed, it will receive Holy Ring City's protection for 30 natural days. You are advised to refine the town's defenses during this period. System. As an advanced town, Shadow Ring Town may open a one-way teleportation channel to one neutral city in the Eternal Realm. Do you wish to enable this feature? Activate it. Shifeng decided without hesitation. System. Please select one neutral city in the Eternal Realm. You cannot change your choice once you have decided. In addition, depending on the distance of the selected neutral city, the eternal coins required to construct the teleportation channel and the 7 luminaries crystals consumed for the teleportation will differ. Immediately, a list of over 100 neutral cities appeared before Shifeng, each with its own teleportation channel construction cost and teleportation fee. Of these neutral cities, the closest one to Shadow Ring Town cost 1,000 eternal gold to connect with a teleportation channel and 1 unit of 7 luminaries crystal per player to teleport. Meanwhile, the farthest one cost 200,000 eternal gold to connect and 200 units of 7 luminaries crystal per player to teleport. Those vampires. Their teleportation cost was only 5 units, yet they charged 100 units per player. When Shifeng saw the teleportation cost for the neutral city, which the several apex powers had connected their advanced town with in his previous life, he couldn't help but curse at them. The early and middle stages were the most advantageous periods for players to develop within the Eternal Realm. If the several apex powers had not been so greedy, the human race's various powers could have had a much easier time resisting the holy race's various powers. This, in turn, could have prevented the holy race's invasion from progressing all the way to the 12 sanctuaries, thus safeguarding the 12 sanctuaries' survival and preserving the continued growth of human players. While Shifeng was pondering which neutral city he should connect Shadowring Town with, a striking name suddenly entered his sight. Luminous Sky City. It was regarded as one of the Eternal Realm's 5 great neutral cities in Shifeng's previous life. It was also an ancient city that had existed since the mythical era. Although it ultimately fell under the control of a royal power, with the exception of Holy Ring City, it was the latest neutral city to be conquered. In addition, it was one of the few neutral cities situated in the middle of the Forbidden Zone. Luminous Sky City, teleportation channel construction cost, 60,000 eternal gold coins teleportation cost, 60 units of 7 luminaries crystal per person. It's not too expensive. After pondering for a moment, Shifeng gritted his teeth and chose to connect Shadowring Town with Luminous Sky City. For a human power like Zero Wing, it would normally be best to have teleportation access to a neutral city on the Western continent. That way, Zero Wing could have an easier time developing on the Western continent. More players would also be willing to head to the Forbidden Zone's Western continent. However, considering he had a city-building order for the Western continent, Shifeng felt it unnecessary to connect Shadowring Town with a neutral city there. Rather than that, it would be more beneficial to have teleportation access to Luminous Sky City, which would eventually become a gathering place for players of the human race and the holy race and one of the 10 most populated cities in the Eternal Realm. Such an advantage would significantly help Zero Wing, especially during the Eternal Realm's early stages. In his previous life, once the coordinates of the Eternal Realm were discovered, various pseudo-apex and apex powers had chosen to consolidate their strength and focus their development on the Eternal Continent. Consequently, other players who had entered the Eternal Realm during that time chose to scatter across the rest of the realm. This, in turn, led to the rise of many human powers outside the Eternal Continent. Some of these human powers even managed to grow to a point where they could exchange blows with the royal powers of the Holy Race. Back then, Zero Wing had missed the right timing to extend its development into the Eternal Realm, so Shifeng naturally couldn't let this mistake happen again. System. Construction of the teleportation channel is completed. Going by the timing of the Eternal Realm's appearance, neither race should have many players operating in Luminous Sky City right now. I can use this opportunity to secure some of the city's prime real estate. Upon seeing the completion of the construction of the teleportation channel, Shifeng registered Shadowring Town's coordinates into the Abyss Workshop certification before stepping into the teleportation array and disappearing from the town. TL notes. 1. Forbidden Zone. This is a general term that covers all locations outside the Eternal Continent, e.g., the Western Continent, the Southern Continent, and everything in between. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3678, Chapter 752, Small Silver Battle Array. Chapter 3678, Chapter 752, Small Silver Battle Array. Chapter 752, Small Silver Battle Array. Off the coast of the Eternal Continent, Luminous Sky City. As Shifeng walked out of the teleportation hall, which was 1,000 meters tall, a large section of the city's landscape came into view. Luminous Sky City was built atop the ocean, resembling a giant moving island. Despite being a neutral city, its player and NPC populations were superior to even the Crystal City of Secrets. How are there so many players here already? Shifeng couldn't help but be taken aback when he saw over 10,000 players resting and walking about on the street in front of the teleportation hall. The areas surrounding Luminous Sky City were filled with sea monsters at level 180 or above. Some of these monsters could rival land-based Tier 6 divine monsters, and some were even level 180 plus, Tier 6 archaic species. Moving farther away from the city, some surrounding maps even housed level 190 plus monsters. For the current Eternal Realms players, who only averaged at level 170, even venturing into this region was a challenge, let alone surviving in it. Meanwhile, upon closer inspection, Shifeng discovered that the players loitering outside the teleportation hall averaged at level 185, with the highest level player he saw being at level 190. Over 5% of these players had also reached Tier 6 already. In addition, most of these players did not have a guild emblem equipped, indicating they were independent players. However, despite their high levels, Shifeng discovered that the equipment standard of these independent players was much inferior compared to the Eternal Continents Guild players. Yet, despite the various powers of the human race and the holy race having yet to set foot into luminous Sky City, so many independent players had arrived already. This situation truly surprised and confused Shifeng. As Shifeng walked down the street, the players loitering on the street side did not pay him any particular attention. They simply took his arrival as normal and continued doing what they had been doing. 20-man grinding team for star-devouring whale tribes. We're missing 2 tier 6 healers. Must be at level 185 and equipped with a level 200 dark gold equipment set at the very least. Recruiting for an independent trade escort quest. We're still missing 3 level 180 plus expert. We'll take anyone fully equipped with level 200 dark gold equipment. Tier 6 players get priority. Quite a few players were recruiting for team members outside the teleportation hall. Moreover, none of these players seemed to care about the race of the players they recruited. Human players were open to recruiting holy race players, while holy race players were open to recruiting human players. Most importantly, everyone around them thought nothing of this situation. They behaved like this was a completely normal thing. If the Eternal Continents players or the Western Continents players were to come here, they would definitely be given a fright. This wasn't just because these players didn't mind teaming up with an enemy race. It was also because of the low equipment requirements they stated. It didn't look like these players were preparing to fight against powerful high-level monsters at all. Instead, it looked like they were prepared to head to a low-level map to stomp on weaklings. Yet, to Shifeng's utter confusion, he saw these teams heading for Luminous Sky City's entrance as soon as they recruited enough members for their teams. Did I come to the wrong place? Shifeng couldn't help but knit his brows as he watched the teams exiting the city. If he hadn't had prior knowledge regarding Luminous Sky City's situation, he would have simply regarded this bizarre situation as normal. However, the problem was that his understanding of Luminous Sky City was no less than his knowledge of the Crystal City of Secrets. After all, Luminous Sky City was one of the Eternal Realm's 5 great neutral cities in his previous life. It was difficult for any player to not know anything about it. Meanwhile, it should be known that star-devouring whales were bona fide archaic species. Their bloodline might be inferior to dragons, but Tier 5 star-devouring whales would have no trouble contending with the average Tier 6 monster. They also usually moved in groups of dozens or over 100. In addition, if a star-devouring whale reached Tier 6, it would even become a regional boss. If the 20-man teams he saw could challenge the star-devouring whales in groups of equal size, they should have no trouble achieving victory. However, if they were to challenge an average-sized tribe of star-devouring whales, there was a very high likelihood they would suffer a team wipe. Not to mention, if their battle lasted too long, the commotion they caused could very well attract other sea monsters wandering nearby. If these 20-man teams were composed of players equipped with top-tier equipment, Shifeng wouldn't be so surprised by their boldness. However, the equipment standard of these players could only be considered average. If they were to rely on such ordinary equipment to grind star-devouring whales, their efficiency would be terrible, and they'd be much better off grinding weaker monsters. After walking down several streets, Shifeng also noticed that the players inhabiting Luminous Sky City had astonishingly high combat standards. Even in the Crystal City of Secrets, 5th-floor experts only made up a tiny fraction of the city's player population. Take Zero Wing, for example. Despite having over 100,000 members operating in the Crystal City, less than 300 of these members were 5th-floor experts. As for pseudo-5th-floor experts, they numbered even fewer than actual 5th-floor experts. Yet, whether it was the human players or holy race players inhabiting Luminous Sky City, roughly 1% of them were pseudo-5th-floor experts. This was a considerably high percentage, and it could already match the ratio of the various pseudo-Apex Powers elite legions. Upon arriving at Luminous Sky City's main street, Shifeng decided to inquire some players about the city's current situation. However, before he could begin his inquiries, he discovered numerous players had set up stalls along the street. It would not be an exaggeration to say that player stalls lined the sides of the main street from beginning to end. Moreover, these stalls offered items of considerable quality, with legendary materials forming the majority of the goods on display. Even battle arrays, which were seldom sold on the market, were being offered by these street vendors. Most surprisingly, Shifeng found that some adventurer teams were actually selling small battle array scrolls. Small advanced bronze battle array scrolls. Small silver battle array scrolls. These small battle array scrolls were one-time consumables, and they could be activated by 20 players when 20 of them were gathered. Meanwhile, when activated, they would strengthen players' basic attributes and allow them to share their 5 senses, and these effects could last for 12 hours. If a team of Tier 5 players were to use a complete small silver battle array, each team member would be strong enough to fight against Tier 6 players in a one-on-one battle. In a group fight, the Tier 5 players would even have an edge in perception due to their shared senses. So that's why so many players dare to leave the city. Realization dawned upon Shifeng as he beheld these small battle array scrolls. With the aid of a small silver battle array, even Tier 5 players with less than optimal equipment could bridge the gap in basic attributes and tiers between themselves and the formidable sea monsters wandering outside Luminous Sky City. Intrigued by this situation, Shifeng decided to approach one of the stalls selling small silver battle arrays. At this time, hundreds of players were browsing around the stall, each at level 185 or above. Quite a few of them were also Tier 6 experts. Normally, a small silver battle array scroll could fetch 6 to 8 eternal gold on the Eternal Continent, with demand consistently exceeding supply. However, the stall Shifeng visited sold these scrolls at a bargain, each costing only 1 eternal gold. Meanwhile, the stall in question was operated by 3 players, all being young women with remarkable appearances. Moreover, Shifeng couldn't help but be shocked when he got a better look at 2 of these beauties. This was because the 2 women in question were Aqua Rose and the Scarlet Merchant Alliance's 7 Melody. Unlike the last time they met, Aqua Rose and 7 Melody had already advanced to Tier 6. They had also reached level 187, which could be considered super first-rate on the Eternal Continent. As for the third woman, she was a swordsman carrying 4 longswords on her back, and her level was even higher than Aqua Rose and 7 Melody, being at level 189. This could be considered first-rate, even in Luminous Sky City. Why is she here? Shifeng couldn't help but be surprised once again when he recognized the female swordsman. Myriad Swords, Frost Raven. She was the commander of the Sky Dragon Knight Order and the only player to own 4 divine swords in the Greater God's domain. In Shifeng's previous life, she was also one of the only 2 10 Great Sword Gods to enter the Divine Glory List's top 10 during the war between the 2 races. While Shifeng was wondering why Frost Raven was developing in Luminous Sky City, a group of players suddenly approached the trio's stall and surrounded it. Demon's Gate is doing business here. Irrelevant bystanders, get lost. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3679, Chapter 753, Turmoil in the Southern Region. Chapter 3679, Chapter 753, Turmoil in the Southern Region. Chapter 753, Turmoil in the Southern Region. Following the sudden loud shout, silence enveloped the entire main street. At the same time, the many players on the street, whether they were human or holy race players, quickly scattered. Even the players thinking of purchasing small silver battle array scrolls at the encircled stall took the initiative to back away. What's Demon's Gate trying to do now? These Demon's Gate bastards. After constantly locking down maps, are they now looking to steal things as well? I doubt that. Small silver battle array scrolls aren't any sort of valuable treasure. Many sea monsters have a chance of dropping them. Tier 6 sea monsters are even guaranteed to drop them. Not to mention, it doesn't look like they are interested in those scrolls whatsoever. Are they interested in those 3 beauties, then? If that's the case, those 3 are in trouble. Demon's Gate is filled with a bunch of PvP maniacs. When the bystanders on the street saw Demon's Gate's 20-man team surrounding the stall operated by Frost Raven, 7 Melody, and Aqua Rose, they couldn't help but express their anger toward Demon's Gate. They also couldn't help but sympathize with the trio. However, despite their feelings over the situation, the bystanders only dared to voice their opinions in hushed discussions. Even though Demon's Gate's team consisted of only 20 players, far fewer than the several hundred bystanders present, nobody actually dared to speak loudly or normally. In fact, not even the Tier 6 bystanders, who similarly outnumbered Demon's Gate's team, dared to voice their opinions. This was because they were aware of one thing: should they dare to provoke Demon's Gate, they could abandon all thoughts of surviving in the Eternal Realm's southern region in the future. In fact, they would be fortunate if they managed to escape with just being cornered out of the southern region or killed back to level 0. What was more likely to happen was having soul annihilation bestowed upon them. After all, this fate had already befallen many of the teams that had dared to provoke Demon's Gate previously. Currently, although many guilds of various sizes were operating in the sea south of the Eternal Continent, virtually all of them had already submitted themselves to either Demon's Gate or the royal power operating in this region. As for those who refused to submit, they had already been dealt with by both parties. Hence, Demon's Gate was essentially the ruler of the southern region, and only the Holy Race's royal power could afford to cross it. Meanwhile, after the Demon's Gate members surrounded the stall, a young man who was clad in a black and white leather jacket and carrying a scythe on his back approached the stall. With his stark white hair and slitted pupils, he exuded an aura of menace that sent chills down the spines of all bystanders. White Ghost. Why is the death scythe here? Many of the experts present shuddered violently when they saw the menacing young man. Of Demon's Gate's younger generation, there existed the 3 great chosen ones and 6 great paragons, and Demon's Gate deemed every one of them capable of becoming powerhouses in the future. Among them, White Ghost the Death Scythe was one of the 6 great paragons. Originally, Demon's Gate had sent White Ghost to the southern region to have him refine himself by clashing against the experts of the royal power. However, due to his vicious nature, White Ghost did far more than just hone himself using the Holy Race's experts. In addition to eliminating every Holy Race expert he encountered, he also killed any human player who dared to voice an opinion regarding Demon's Gate's conduct. No less than 1,000 fifth-floor experts in the southern region have perished at White Ghost's hands to date. He had also slain several of the Royal Power's Transcendent List reserve candidates, earning him a place on the Holy Race's Transcendent List. Just recently, he had even eliminated a taboo-level existence from the Scarlet Merchant Alliance. At this juncture, it would be an understatement to label him a monster cloaked in human skin. Meanwhile, under everyone's gaze, White Ghost slowly made his way up to Frost Raven, Seven Melody, and Aqua Rose. "You have 2 choices, Aqua," White Ghost said to Aqua Rose, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Either you relinquish that item to us now, or none of you 3 will ever leave Luminous Sky City alive." After a slight pause, White Ghost turned to look at Frost Raven and continued, "The Vice Guild leader has already given the word. Should you surrender the item, not only will you get to join Demon's Gate, but Miss Raven here will also get to become a core member of ours." Despite White Ghost's seemingly friendly invitation, everyone present could sense the unquestionable authority in his words. Even the onlooking Tier 6 experts couldn't help but shudder at the oppressive atmosphere he created. However, despite the threatening invitation, many onlooking players couldn't help but grow envious of Aqua Rose and Frost Raven. It should be known that Demon's Gate was a bona fide apex power. Apart from those nurtured internally, anyone else who wished to join Demon's Gate would first have to meet its incredibly high entry requirements. As for the privilege of becoming a core member of Demon's Gate, it was normally something that members could only earn after slaughtering countless lives. Very rarely would Demon's Gate invite a player to become a core member. However, as long as one successfully became a core member of Demon's Gate, one would enjoy an exalted position. Even the members of the royal power operating in the southern region would hesitate to kill a core member of Demon's Gate. The reason for this was that Demon's Gate was made up of a bunch of lunatics. Anyone who dared to kill a core member of Demon's Gate would face unrelenting retaliation from the apex power. Of course, this did not imply that the royal power operating in the southern region was weaker than Demon's Gate. On the contrary, The royal power in question could easily wipe the floor with Demon's Gate in a direct confrontation. The problem was that Demon's Gate's members operated like assassins, employing all sorts of covert tactics to catch their opponents off guard. They would never offer their opponents a fair fight. While everyone thought Aqua Rose would accept White Ghost's offer, Frost Raven, looking like the trio's leader, suddenly spoke up in a tone that was neither humble nor arrogant, saying, "Allow us to refuse Demon's Gate's offer. If that is all you are here for, please take your leave and don't disturb our business." Aqua Rose nodded in agreement. However, as Frost Raven's voice faded, a frigid atmosphere descended upon the street. An oppressive killing intent also swept across a radius of 1,000 yards, paralyzing many of the Tier 5 experts present. "Are you rejecting Demon's Gate's goodwill?" White Ghost asked. Although he kept his faint smile, a cold glint flashed in his eyes. "Do you know the consequences of rejecting Demon's Gate's goodwill?" As soon as White Ghost spoke, the Demon's Gate members behind him took a step forward, bearing their menacing looks and killing intent at Frost Raven's group. So long as Frost Raven's group dared to utter another word of refusal, or if White Ghost gave the word, they would immediately move to eliminate the 3 women. Are those 3 stupid? How dare they refuse Demon's Gate? Have they grown tired of living in God's domain? Now that the Death Scythe has already approached them in person, do they really think Demon's Gate wouldn't dare to attack them inside the city? Many bystanders couldn't help but look at Frost Raven, Aqua Rose, and Seven Melody in disbelief. They never thought there would exist someone in the southern region who would dare to refuse Demon's Gate's conditions. It should be known that Demon's Gate would not hesitate to kill even the chosen ones of the holy race's royal powers. Moreover, even after being slighted in such a manner, the royal powers could do nothing about it. If Demon's Gate decided to target a group of independent players, the difficulty of the task would be easier than child's play. At this time, Frost Raven, Aqua Rose, and Seven Melody also started to feel a little pressure. They did not doubt whether White Ghost's team would dare to attack them in Luminous Sky City if they rejected Demon's Gate's offer again. Moreover, with the prowess of Demon's Gate's members, if these lunatics threw caution to the wind, there was a high chance the 3 of them might not survive until the surrounding NPC guards came to their rescue. The situation would be even worse if White Ghost joined the fight. While Frost Raven, Seven Melody, and Aqua Rose were thinking about how they could get out of this predicament, a deep voice suddenly rang out from nearby. "Has Demon's Gate never heard of first come, first served? Can you let me finish my shopping before you start fighting?" As the words spoken by this voice echoed across the street, the originally heavy atmosphere lightened up significantly. Then, everyone present couldn't help but turn their attention toward the source of the voice, all wanting to see who was the fool who dared to stir trouble during this serious moment. At this time, a cloaked man carrying 2 long swords around his waist could be seen walking up to the trio's stall. The man approached the stall with a casual expression, behaving as if Demon's Gate's members did not exist. Guild Leader Black Flame. TL notes. 1. Southern region, this is not referring to the southern continent. Also, as a refresh, Eternal Continent equals Northern Continent equals Human Races Continent Western Continent equals Holy Races Continent. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc. Please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3680, Chapter 754, Demon's Gate. Chapter 3680, Chapter 754, Demon's Gate. Chapter 754, Demon's Gate. Aqua Rose and Seven Melody were momentarily stunned when they saw the cloaked swordsman approaching their stall. They never thought the person who dared to speak out against Demon's Gate would actually be Shafong, the person they had encountered at the Golden Spire. Meanwhile, White Ghost furrowed his brow as he cast a chilling glare at Shafong. Although White Ghost did not speak up, almost everyone present could also sense his surging anger as the atmosphere that had briefly relaxed became incredibly tense once more. Meanwhile, upon sensing White Ghost's anger, the surrounding players quickly distanced themselves from him, afraid they would get dragged into the ensuing crossfire. That guy must be crazy to stand out in this situation. Is he really going to challenge Demon's Gate's prestige? The surrounding bystanders felt their hearts rising up their throats as they looked at Shafong. They also had no doubts that Shifeng would become a corpse in just a moment. "Kid, it seems you have a lot of courage, daring to interfere in Demon's Gate's matters," White Ghost said coldly as he looked at Shifeng. "Is this your first day in Luminous Sky City?" It was common knowledge in the southern region that Demon's Gate was the region's ruler. Not even the Holy Race's various powers would dare to oppose it here. Yet, someone was now openly challenging this established fact. This was a brazen act of provocation against Demon's Gate's reputation. It had already been a long while since he had encountered such a situation after his arrival in the Eternal Realm. However, he did not mind letting everyone in the southern region learn of Demon's Gate's horrors once more. As soon as White Ghost finished speaking, several of the Tier 6 experts around him promptly encircled Shifeng, cutting off all his paths of retreat. Meanwhile, when Aqua Rose and Seven Melody saw this development, they couldn't help but grow concerned. They felt that Shifeng was playing with fire by provoking Demon's Gate right now. Although Luminous Sky City had NPC guards patrolling all its streets, players weren't guaranteed absolute safety. If Demon's Gate was determined to take action, even Frost Raven, the strongest of their trio, might not escape unscathed. Demon's Gate was an apex power. Because of this, all of its experts capable of advancing to Tier 6 at this stage of the Eternal Realm would be fully equipped with legendary equipment and have learned mana purification techniques. In terms of overall strength, they could rival Tier 6 gods of the same level, and even the chosen ones of pseudo-apex powers would have to fight them seriously to ensure their victory. While Aqua Rose and Seven Melody were mired in concern, Frost Raven suddenly spoke through the party chat, "I'll try to stop them later. Use this opportunity to run to the NPC guards. So long as the NPC guards are around, not even White Ghost will dare to try his luck. Be very careful, Big Sis Raven. White Ghost is no ordinary opponent," Seven Melody cautioned when she heard Frost Raven voicing her intention to help Shifeng. Although she was confident in Frost Raven's strength, White Ghost's notoriety was not unfounded. Meanwhile, relying on their sixth sense, Demon's Gate's members noticed the gazes of Aqua Rose and Seven Melody veering toward the patrolling NPC guards nearby and promptly realized their intentions. However, just as they were about to intercept the two, a light blue long sword suddenly appeared in their way. "Stay!" Shifeng's deep voice rang across the area again, stunning everyone in silence. No one had expected anyone to dare to stand against Demon's Gate, least of all a young swordsman whose name was unknown in the southern region. "Are you tired of living, punk?" The four Demon's Gate members encircling Shifeng bellowed. They never thought Shifeng would dare to ignore them to such an extent. Immediately, they took a threatening step forward, trying to intimidate Shifeng into backing away. As for taking actual action, none of them had thought of doing so thus far. After all, they hadn't received a verbal command from White Ghost to take action. If they recklessly attacked Shifeng, they would instantly attract the NPC guards' attention and be regarded as enemies. At the same time, one of the four Demon's Gate members, a level 187, Tier 6 assassin, suddenly used Soul Guidance, a Tier 6 skill, on Shifeng, casting a blue ray directly onto his soul. Should Soul Guidance be allowed to take effect, Shifeng's location would become known to the assassin throughout the skill's duration. There'd be no hiding from Demon's Gate for him. Moreover, as Soul Guidance had no offensive properties, its use would not attract the NPC guard's attention. However, before the blue ray could come into contact with Shifeng, a sword light suddenly grazed the Tier 6 assassin's neck. Then, the assassin collapsed to the ground like a puppet whose strings had been cut. An item even appeared next to the assassin's lifeless body. This scene immediately stunned everyone. "He's dead. What happened? How did that assassin from Demon's Gate die? Why didn't he dodge that attack?" Despite the clear indication of the Tier 6 assassin's depleted HP bar, many of the bystanders remained baffled as to what had just happened. The Tier 6 assassin was evidently in the midst of activating Soul Guidance on Shifeng, yet he had inexplicably died mid-action. To add to their confusion, Shifeng had remained motionless throughout the entire encounter. What did Guild Leader Black Flame do just now? Seven Melody gaped in shock, her eyes filled with disbelief as she looked at the corpse of the Demon's Gate assassin. What incredible reaction speed! Frost Raven was indescribably shocked as she looked at Shafong, who looked like he hadn't moved at all this entire time. While the more discerning observers present might have noticed Shafong killing the Demon's Gate assassin with a single sword strike, the reality of the situation was far more intricate. Being one of the few players in Luminous Sky City equipped with multiple fragmented divine artifacts and the owner of a unique hidden class, Frost Raven possessed 5 senses and physique far superior to even Tier 6 gods of the same level. Because of this, she managed to catch a glimpse of what actually happened. In reality, Shafong had executed dozens of subtle alterations to his sword's trajectory during his seemingly straightforward attack. Meanwhile, overwhelmed by the rapid and unpredictable changes, the Demon's Gate assassin ultimately succumbed to the final trajectory taken by Shafong's sword. Aside from the onlooking crowd, Demon's Gate's members were similarly stunned by this situation. It was especially so for the 3 other Demon's Gate members encircling Shafong. They also couldn't help but reveal grim expressions as they looked at Shafong. If anyone else out of the 4 of them got killed, they might not have thought much of it. However, the Tier 6 assassin who got killed was the most skilled out of them. If even the Tier 6 assassin couldn't survive an exchange with Shafong, how would they fare? "What are you all worried about?" White Ghost suddenly shouted when he saw the anxious looks on his subordinates. "We are inside Luminous Sky City. He initiated the attack. He'll be the target of the NPC guards." At White Ghost's reminder, everyone from Demon's Gate promptly snapped out of their daze and encircled Shafong. Since Shafong was the aggressor in this situation, all they had to do was buy time until the NPC guards arrived to deal with him. "Friend, leave quickly. You'll be in trouble if the NPC guards arrive," Frost Raven hurriedly said to Shafong. It was never a good idea to initiate an attack while inside NPC towns and cities. If captured by NPC guards, especially inside a place like Luminous Sky City, one would suffer a miserable fate. "It's too late to escape now." The Demon's Gate members surrounding Shafong sneered and promptly took offensive maneuvers against him. Previously, they were wary of attacking Shafong for fear of being targeted by the NPC guards. But since Shafong had initiated an attack on one of their team members, they could now attack him without fear of retaliation from the NPC guards, as their actions would be considered self-defense. Immediately, 3 Tier 6 tanks closed in on Shafong with their shields raised, while 2 Tier 6 mage gods erected defensive screens to cover any gaps left by the tanks. They had no intention of giving Shafong any opportunities to escape. "Can you defend against my attacks, though?" When Shafong saw the players closing in on him, he reacted by executing Sword's Orbit. With his strength being on par with level 200, Tier 6 gods, even level 185 plus, Tier 6 tanks with their life-saving skills activated could not survive more than 2 or 3 attacks from him. If he could directly hit their bodies, he could finish them even quicker. Subsequently, with Shafong at the center, a resplendent galaxy of stars spread across the street. Boom! Suddenly, White Ghost, who had armed himself with his scythe at some point, was sent flying over a dozen yards through the air. Upon landing, he stumbled several steps before regaining his footing. Over a quarter of his HP bar had also disappeared. As for the nearly 10 Demon's Gate members who surrounded Shafong, they all met an even worse fate, all of them dying on the spot. How is this possible? White Ghost couldn't help but look at Shafong in disbelief. It should be known that his weapon, Death Scythe, was a fragmented divine artifact. With it equipped, he could achieve strength nearing the standard of ancient gods of the same level. Furthermore, when he executed Storm Scythe, a gold combat technique that came as a set with the Death Scythe, he could exhibit power enough to knock even Tier 6 gods of the same level into the air. Yet, when he clashed with Shafong's attack using Storm Scythe, he was the one who got knocked into the air instead. This scene also dumbfounded the surviving members of Demon's Gate. After all, White Ghost, nicknamed the Death Scythe, was sent flying in a direct confrontation. Moreover, it was after he had used a gold combat technique. Has he already mastered the accompanying combat technique? Shafong couldn't help but be a little surprised as he looked at White Ghost. Some divine artifacts in God's domain came with corresponding gold combat techniques. These techniques existed to maximize the potential of their corresponding divine artifacts, and they were much more powerful than the average gold combat technique. However, they were also much more difficult to master. Your Highness, the NPC guards have arrived. That swordsman is dead. When the surviving Demon's Gate members saw some NPC guards entering their sight, they immediately revealed cold smiles as they looked at Shifeng. Shifeng's strength might have exceeded their expectations, but it was utterly useless against Luminous Sky City's level 200+ NPC guards. This is bad. Seven Melody couldn't help but grow worried when they saw the NPC guards encircling Shifeng. However, just as Demon's Gate's members were waiting to see how Shifeng would struggle in the hands of the NPC guards, the Tier 6 guard captain suddenly walked up to Shifeng and respectfully said, "Greetings, Count Shadowring. How may we be of service to you today? If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc. Please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 3681, Chapter 755, Maniac vs. Maniac. Chapter 3681, Chapter 755, Maniac vs. Maniac. Chapter 755, Maniac vs. Maniac. Currently, more than 20 level 210+ NPC guards equipped with standardized legendary equipment sets stood along the sides of the main street. Although these NPC guards were only at Tier 5, any one of them could easily suppress Tier 6 experts under level 200. Meanwhile, following the words of the level 220, Tier 6 guard captain equipped in a luxurious suit of armor, all of the players present froze on the spot. Demon's Gate's members were especially dumbfounded by this situation. Why aren't these NPC guards taking action? Count Shadowring? Who is that guy? Questions popped up in everyone's minds, one after another. The scene before them had completely overturned their knowledge of Luminous Sky City. It was commonly known that any player who dared to cause a scene in Luminous Sky City would meet a swift death. This was an ironclad rule that nobody had managed to defy thus far. Yet, now, not only had this rule been broken, but the level 220, Tier 6 guard captain was even behaving very respectfully to Shifeng. "Count! Am I dreaming?" Astonishment filled Seven Melody as she looked at Shifeng. Luminous Sky City was a neutral city in the Eternal Realm. Because of this, obtaining an aristocratic position in it was incredibly difficult. In fact, even becoming an ordinary noble was something the various powers could only dream of accomplishing right now. Besides Seven Melody, Aqua Rose was similarly taken aback by this unexpected development. They had been operating in Luminous Sky City and striving to establish a foothold in the southern region, a land rich in ancient legacies, for a considerable period already. Consequently, they had invested significant effort into contributing to Luminous Sky City. However, despite their efforts, they still lacked a lot of contribution points to attain the status of ordinary nobles. Yet, she was now being told that Shifeng had attained the rank of Count. Unlike everyone else, though, Shifeng himself was not surprised by the NPC guard's behavior. As a 2-star Count of Holy Ring City, he would enjoy basic noble privileges in all neutral cities across the Eternal Realm. Although these were merely the privileges afforded to an ordinary noble, they still put him above the average player. Although Demon's Gate's assassin did not attack him, the other party used a tracking skill. If such an action was taken against the average player in a neutral city, it wouldn't be considered an offense. However, when done to players with noble status, it would be judged as aggressive behavior, and nearby NPC guards would immediately arrest the person using the tracking skill. As a side note, if a player possessed true count privileges in a neutral city, they wouldn't even need to have their enemies use tracking skills on them to make them a target of the city. If their enemies lacked sufficient status in the city, they could simply have their enemies banished from the city. And even if these banished players could enter the city again, they would need to pay an exorbitant deposit before they could do so. Had Demon's Gate's members initiated an attack on him, their fates would have been even worse. Even if none of their attacks managed to hit him, he could have the NPC guards apprehend and imprison all of Demon's Gate's members. Of course, if both parties had an aristocratic position, NPCs would judge the situation differently and apprehend only the first party to have caused actual damage. However, as a neutral city in the Eternal Realm, Luminous Sky City should have only been activated recently. It was unlikely that anyone would have an ordinary noble status, let alone an aristocratic position. This was also why Shifeng was confident in helping Aqua Rose resist Demon's Gate. These people used a tracking skill on me. With my status in Luminous Sky City, what's the heaviest punishment I can impose on them? Shifeng asked the NPC guard captain as he pointed at White Ghost's group. According to the city's rules, since they intend to harm you, the principal offender will be detained for 1 month, while the offender's companions can be detained for up to 10 days, the guard captain said as he looked at White Ghost's group. Good. Lock them up for 10 days, then, Shifeng said, nodding. Understood. At Shifeng's instructions, the guard captain promptly gestured at his subordinates to apprehend White Ghost's group. Meanwhile, when the bystanders on the street saw the NPC guards moving to apprehend Demon's Gate's members, their mouths widened in shock. It was clearly Shifeng who had initiated an attack on Demon's Gate and killed multiple of its members. Yet, Demon's Gate's members were the ones who were now being arrested. Moreover, they would be imprisoned for 10 days. This was undoubtedly the biggest loss Demon's Gate had ever suffered in Luminous Sky City. Damn it! How does he have the rank of Count? White Ghost's expression darkened at this unexpected development. White Ghost was more or less aware of the privileges granted to players holding aristocratic positions in the Eternal Realm's neutral cities. However, he never thought Shifeng would already attain the rank of Count so soon after Luminous Sky City's activation. As for getting imprisoned for 10 days, he'd rather die multiple times than suffer such a fate. The Eternal Realm had only appeared not long ago, and the power structure within it remained fluctuating. It was especially chaotic in the southern region, a place where many powers operated. If he wished to maintain an advantage in the southern region, he would need to treat every day with utmost importance. If he became absent for 10 days, he wouldn't even be surprised if the southern region took on a completely new look. What should we do, Your Highness? A Demon's Gate member asked anxiously when he saw the approaching NPC guards. 10 days. If they were to fall behind by 10 days, becoming second-rate players would be the least of their concerns. Most importantly, they'd lag behind other players in accumulating contribution points in Luminous Sky City, and other powers would have long snatched all of the important real estate in the city. Retreat. Do everything you can to retreat, White Ghost shouted. So long as we leave the city, these NPCs will stop chasing us. We can take our time dealing with these bastards afterward. Their only option right now was to escape out of Luminous Sky City. For them, a 10-day jail sentence was no different than a death sentence. It should be known that the internal competition within Demon's Gate was vastly more intense compared to other powers. If they allowed their competitors to surpass them, it would be incredibly difficult for them to recover later. At White Ghost's command, the remaining Demon's Gate members hastily activated their life-saving tools to escape. Not even for a moment did any of them think of fighting the NPC guards. At their current levels, these level 210 plus, Tier 5 NPC guards could send them flying or injure them heavily with even a casual attack. Not to mention, if they tried to fight these NPC guards, not only would they die, but they would still have to spend 10 days in jail. They're finally leaving. Seven Melody sighed in relief when she saw Demon's Gate's members retreating. So long as their group of 3 could successfully avoid a confrontation with Demon's Gate today, it would become much easier for them to shake Demon's Gate off their tail in the future. This was because they would finally have enough money to rent a transport ship after today's sales and start taking on delivery quests to accumulate contribution points rapidly. Then, once they became nobles of Luminous Sky City, they would no longer have to fear Demon's Gate in the city. While Demon's Gate's members were treating, White Ghost suddenly took out a scroll from his bag and activated it. Immediately afterward, the sky above the main street darkened, and a powerful aura of death enveloped the entire street. Subsequently, dark threads descended upon Shifeng and Aqua Rose's group at an astonishing speed. Even Shifeng got hit by these threads, failing to react in time. However, the dark threads did not cause any damage. Instead, they penetrated deep into the souls of Shifeng and the others before quickly forming a mark. A demon mark. Shifeng immediately recognized the mark that had formed in the depths of his soul. There was a special scroll exclusively available to Demon's Gate that, when used, could place a demon mark on players' souls. Each demon mark lasted for 6 days, and it allowed all Demon's Gate members to know the marked player's location throughout this period. If Demon's Gate members were within a certain distance of a marked player, the demon mark would even actively inform them of the marked player's presence. Meanwhile, so long as a Demon's Gate member managed to kill a marked player while the demon mark was still in effect, they could earn an astronomical amount of guild contribution points. Essentially, the demon mark was a bounty order used internally by Demon's Gate, and it was something that only a very small number of individuals in Demon's Gate could use. Moreover, it was a privilege that they could only use once in their lifetime. So what if you are a count? Since you dare to make an enemy out of Demon's Gate in the southern region, only death awaits you. White Ghost said, sneering when he saw Shifeng and the others getting hit by the demon mark. Although I don't know who you are, I want to see how long you'll survive being hunted by Demon's Gate. Originally, White Ghost had intended to kill Shifeng to establish his authority over the other players and powers operating in Luminous Sky City. However, he never expected to be played by Shifeng, causing Demon's Gate's reputation to be damaged. Now, he was resolved to kill Shifeng at all costs. As for Aqua Rose's group, he naturally wouldn't spare them, either. With the demon mark now in effect, if Shifeng, Aqua Rose, Seven Melody, and Frost Raven were to take even a step out of Luminous Sky City during the next 6 days, they would immediately face an endless pursuit by Demon's Gate's members. It's over. He actually used the demon mark. None of them can escape now. I knew it would turn out like this. It's simply suicide to go against Demon's Gate in the southern region. The bystanders couldn't help but lament when they looked at Shifeng's group. They could already tell how seriously White Ghost took this matter. He absolutely wouldn't let them off easily. Meanwhile, Aqua Rose, Seven Melody, and Frost Raven also revealed grim looks at this turn of events. They never thought White Ghost would be so ruthless as to use his once-in-a-lifetime privilege on them. Is that so? I'll be waiting, then. When Shifeng saw White Ghost trying to escape using a Tier 5 random teleportation scroll, he executed Flowing Space to arrive before the other party instantly and brandished the Winter of Eternal Night. Holy annihilation! Holy annihilation! Holy annihilation! Pillars of flame rose into the sky one after another. Shifeng's attacks were so swift that White Ghost had no time to defend himself with a combat technique. He could only instinctively swing his scythe to parry each fiery strike. As a result, his HP plummeted with each attack blocked. In a mere second, 4 exchanges took place, and White Ghost was reduced to ashes on the 4th exchange. From the beginning to the end, White Ghost never got to use his random teleportation scroll. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc. Please let us know report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.